Hi everyone, welcome to this week's Halton Hills Housing Update. So again, I apologize for my voice. I'm battling like the longest cold ever, so this is what you get to listen to today. I apologize. So this week we're going to look at January's numbers as well as what happened last week in Halton Hills. So looking at our January numbers, last year, January of 2023, our average price was $1,023,000. This past January, no huge surprise given especially how the month started, our average price last month was $955,000. So we're down 6.5% year over year. I think that might be one of the only months that I think we're down significantly year over year because the market feels like it's going the opposite way. But that is only the third time really since 2021 that we have seen our average price dip below $1 million. So in October of 2022, we saw it dip below $1 million. Last month it was at around 920, and this month we're up to 955. So yes, we are below that million mark, which has not been a common occurrence in the last few years, but we're up versus last month, and I would say the trend that we're seeing the last few weeks is that prices are going to be rebounding pretty nicely here. Looking at units, we're actually up 22% year over year. So last January, which was a pretty bad month for us, I would say, it felt not good. It felt kind of doom and gloom last January. We sold 37 units, and this past month we sold 45. So we're up 22% year over year. I mean, it's a far cry from where we came from a few years ago when we were selling like 90 plus units in a month, but it's an improvement. Another thing to note, of the 45 that sold, only 16 of them were over that $1 million mark, and majority of those sold in the last 2 weeks. So last 2 weeks of January. So the majority of properties were under that million mark, which is going to pull down our average price point, and only 2 of them we're over 1.5 million. So we still aren't seeing that super high ticket property sell. And until the lower end of the market starts to really boom, which we're kind of getting into, I don't think we're gonna start to see sales pick up in our higher price points. It could be a month or two of a trickle before we really start to see a push in the higher price points. But we had a property last week listed in the 1.6 millions, and it was the only one that got over asking. So it's, you know, there's buyers out there, and as the market starts to stabilize in terms of like not feeling like it's crashing, and the buyer confidence comes back, we are going to start to see those higher ticket properties start to sell again. So now let's look what happened last week. We are definitely, I mean, the buyer's market, I feel like, is now gone. There was this like small window where buyers had a little bit of leeway for a few months, but now that is like, it feels like it's totally out the window given where things are this week. So in Georgetown last week, we had 10 sales. Good week for Georgetown. Double digit is a good week for Georgetown. Only one of them sold over asking, like I just talked about. So still not a crazy amount of bidding wars, but a lot of the properties that transacted last week have been on the market for quite some time. So we are starting to see that older inventory starting to get purchased, and some of the newer stuff is already sold or sold conditionally that came up in the last 7 days. So all of these trends are pointing us that we are leaving our buyer's market, and it's going to flip back in favor of the sellers. We only had 8 new listings in Georgetown last week, which is not enough. As well, I'll get to the terminated and the ones that came off the market, but our inventory is just not bouncing back in Georgetown, and our demand certainly is. Looking at Acton this week, they only had 1 sale, which is down versus January. They were seeing some pretty high weeks, so only 1 sale in Acton and 5 new listings there. There was nothing that happened in Glen Williams or Limehouse. The rural market saw 1 sale and 3 new listings. So last week, we had 11 properties when I searched the expireds and terminateds. Of those 11, 1 of them came back on the market at a reduced price, which is much lower than we've been seeing. 1 of them came back on the market at the same price, and 9 properties still exited the market. So when I'm standing here talking about the fact that inventory is going down, 9 properties exiting the market is certainly not great for inventory levels. We don't want to see those properties leaving, and so it's been a trend since October that properties are exiting the market. Like I said, I think that's going to slow down, but we are sitting with higher inventory levels in places like the rural market. And so a lot of those are just coming off because they're not getting what they want. The market's still not in that higher bracket yet. So going to be watching that closely, but 9 properties off the market leads me to the fact that our inventory is down again. So we had 98 active listings in Halton Hills last week. This week we are at 94. That number has not been seen since April of 2022, which you will remember was kind of near the peak of the chaos. The peak of the chaos really was February and March of 2022. But 94 active listings is very low for Halton Hills. So it's been dropping steadily week after week. So that is not a good sign for buyers. Looking at Georgetown this week, this is really significant, and this is, I guess, the biggest indicator. We are down from 51 to 44 active listings in Georgetown. We have not seen that number since March of 2022. That is a very low number for Georgetown. We were at, in October, 140. So we have dropped like almost 100 listings in Georgetown in the last few months. So 44 active listings, we're starting to see bidding wars, things are getting busy, things are selling quickly. This is just an indicator that like we're probably going to have a very chaotic next few months. So now looking at our active price points, under 800,000 went from 12 to 11 active listings. 800 to $1 million, this is very notable, is down from 9 to 6 active listings. That price point is the one that's been moving, and our strongest price point, 6 listings, is super, super low. When I pulled it up, I was like, oh my gosh, there's like nothing available between 800 and $1 million. So that price point, having scarce inventory, is going to lead to prices going up. It's just going to happen. 1 to 1.5 million is down slightly from 19 to 18 active listings, and 1.5 million plus is down from 11 to 9 active listings. So like I've talked about, that price point is not really moving, but there's not a lot of stuff available. We were at like 30 at one point in that pocket. So another thing to note, when I looked back on March of 2022, when we were at the same inventory levels we were at, under 800,000 only had 3 active listings. Like you couldn't get a house under 800,000. But the 8 to 1 million had 11 active listings. So that was a much busier price point at that time, and it had more listings than what we're looking at now. And you know, the market was insanity. So I really think having only 6 active listings in 800 to $1 million is what's really going to start to push the market upwards. All those semis that were, you know, getting 800 to 850, those are going to start to push into the 9s. And our Delrex bungalows, they're going to probably start pushing closer to that $1 million again. And all of that is going to be a trickle effect of kind of where our pricing is going to go this year. Looking at Acton, they're up from 16 to 18 active listings, but still not super high. Again, when we are talking about when inventory levels were at this level previously in 2022, they were at 14. So a little bit higher than that time, but still not crazy high. Glen Williams remained the same this week at 4. You have to have $2.1 million plus to live in the Glen. So those properties are not going to be moving too rapidly with not many buyers in those pockets. Limehouse remained the same at 0, and the rural market is up from 27 to 28 active listings. And back then in 2022, it only had 12. So the rural market was very scarce back then, and we are sitting with extremely high inventory in the rural market. But as always, when Georgetown's inventory starts to really dip, that's when we start to feel things pick up in the rural market. So that will be another trend that I'm sort of looking for. I think it's a really interesting update this week. I'm not surprised to see the pricing down. That it does not alarm me, given the fact that the majority of stuff that is selling is under that $1 million price point still. But right now, there's only 17 properties available under $1 million, and the rest of it is over $1 million. So if we continue to see a strong sales month throughout February, inevitably that's all going to pull our average price point up, because there really is not a lot available under $1 million to buy. So I really think that the ship has sailed on this buyer market. There are a handful of properties in Georgetown that have been there for a while now. They're starting to dwindle. So the opportunity to get a good price is certainly almost like it's almost completely gone, because I really think that buyer demand and the buyer confidence has bounced back really nicely. And without all of those properties that came off the market flooding back to the market, we just are not going to see inventory keep up with where demand is. And so if you terminated your property last year and you were like, I'm going to wait for the spring, I would argue that February and March are going to be very strong months, and to be watching what happens. I mean, we're not in chaos right now, but this feels like the start. It's hard to believe ever going back to that kind of craziness is even an option, but especially with interest rates this high, but they're starting to soften, and it just feels like that is sort of on the horizon. So as a buyer, I would get your ducks in a row to be participating in the market right now before it kind of booms. And as a seller, I'd really be thinking about putting your house on the market in the coming weeks to hopefully capitalize before the news gets out that the market's amazing and then everyone else starts to do it too. So lots to watch. January's numbers landed exactly where I thought they may land, and just a really interesting start to February. So I will be back next week. Have a great week, everyone.